So this week we're going to start looking at what I call words to the wise. I don't know if that's up on the screen or not. Word to the wise, words to the wise. Are you wise? Maybe that's a good question to start with. You know, there's all sorts of wisdom in our world, isn't there? Some people who purport to be wise. You know, it's these experts. You know what PhD means, right? Piled higher and deeper. That's all it means. That's all it means, piled higher and deeper. It does not mean necessarily they're experts. I mean, I have a PhD. Big deal. It's just a piece of paper. It shows that they've worked at something. Yeah, they may have some expertise in a particular area. Doesn't mean they're experts. Does it mean they're wise? No, I wouldn't even say that. So our world has these ideas of wisdom, and they come from all sorts of sources. But, of course, the best words of wisdom, I think, come from the Lord. So let me just give you a couple. Fight truth decay. Study the Bible daily. Pretty good. How will you spend eternity? Smoking or none? It's unlikely that there will be a reduction in the wages of sin. I mean, they're there, the wages. Do not wait for the hearse to take you to church. If you don't like the way you were born, try being born again. You have to worry about or wonder about those humans. They think God is dead and Elvis is alive. Janet. Just pointing to her because she's a big Elvis fan. The devil may be stoking the fire, but God has his hand on the thermostat. A closed mouth gathers no feet. No feet. Foot in the mouth, you know. Prayer is the only call that the government can't hear. It takes a lot of faith to be an atheist. And then last of these, experts made the Titanic, amateurs made the ark. So we do see wisdom around us. I mean, those are more playful, right? I mean, and they're churchy, they are. And there's truth in those, aren't there? There is truth in a lot of those. I mean, here's a couple more. Never slap a man who's chewing tobacco. I mean, it makes sense, right? Never kick a cow chip on a hot day. Believe me, I know that one. There are two theories to arguing with a woman. Neither works. Always drink upstream from the herd. And if your dad gets mad and asks, do you think I'm stupid? Don't answer. That's cowboy logic. And there was one more that my wife suggested, so I have to tell this one. If your wife asks you if the outfit she has on makes her look fat, do not answer. Run outside and wash the car. Do not even go there. Okay? So why do we have Proverbs? What is wisdom about? Wisdom really is to help us live, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's to help us live fully. So we have the book of Proverbs, and so we're going to start there, and we're only going to go through 7 verses. And call it an introduction, call it something like that. My idea really was to try to just differentiate the wisdom that we see in our world and the wisdom that God gives us and how he gives us. So Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1. I think this will be on the screen. If not, they are. It's also in the Bible app. If you want to go there, I put all the notes in there last night. These are the Proverbs of Solomon, David's son, king of Israel. Their purpose is to teach people wisdom and discipline, to help them understand the insights of the wise. Their purpose is to teach people to live disciplined and successful lives, to help them do what is right, just, and fair. These proverbs will give insight to the simple, knowledge and discernment to the young. Let the wise listen to these proverbs and become even wiser. Let those with understanding receive guidance. By exploring the meaning in these proverbs and parables, the words of the wise and their riddles. And in verse 7, the fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Now, there's a lot of truth. We're going to focus on that one in a moment. But, you know, I remember when I first came to the Lord, so this is a lot of years ago, and I didn't know what the Bible was. I mean, I just read it, and I still didn't really understand it. Is anybody else there? I mean, it takes time, right? We read it and we assimilate it. You know, I like to start in the New Testament. And I'd read about Christ and read about what Jesus did, and it just blew my mind, of course. Just the humanity of him and the extra humanity in that he showed grace and love and forgiveness and kindness and all of those kind of attributes that I didn't see in the world. But I didn't see, and even though in, say, Matthew 6, Matthew 7, in those areas, Jesus is really playing on something, blessed are the poor in spirit, and on, those kinds of things, I didn't see practical stuff. I mean, it just didn't dawn on me that the Bible even had that until one day I ended up in the book of Proverbs. And it's like, wow, I mean, this is so stinking practical. What is the matter with us as people? You want to read something that's practical, read it. I mean, and talk about guidance for life. And you know, as a young man, so I was 21 when I came to the Lord. That really, the book of Proverbs was so instrumental in helping guide me. It's like it provided that foundation that I needed to be able to start to understand what Jesus was really saying, because much of what he said has foundations in the Proverbs. So if you haven't read Proverbs, get over there, start reading it. You'll see what I'm talking about. It's like it all goes together and it all meshes, and it's like God had this idea, this ideal. It's right there in front of us. Just read it. Let's figure out what it is and what it means. So we're going to look at that today. Now, what is wisdom? Well, I want to refer back. King Solomon asked for wisdom, a discerning heart, in 1 Kings 3, 7, and 9. Now, O Lord, you have made your servant to be king in the place of my father David, yet I am but a little child. I do not know how to go out or come in. That's how I felt at 21. I mean, I didn't have any foundation, no direction in my life. And so, then I skip verse 8, but go to verse 9. So give your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, to discern between good and evil. For who is able to judge this great people of yours? You know, we can't really gain knowledge of spiritual things if we begin at the wrong point, right? And that is, according to verse 7 in that passage there, the fear of the Lord. If we don't understand who he is, so let me define what I mean by that, okay? Now, I realize this is much broader than that, but it's a way. Fearing the Lord is like recognizing his character, responding to him in reverence, to understanding he really is God. He is the one who created us, gives us the breath that we breathe, makes the heart function, the nerves work, all of those things, but also trusting, worshiping, obeying, and serving him. That is the idea of the fear of the Lord. Of course, it's beyond that, and it includes all of our walk as Christians, but that's the idea. But the fools, if you will, in verse 7 there, they reject that. Let's go back and reread that verse again, okay? Fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. We see that around us, don't you? We don't want to hear it. We don't want to think about those things. So to be wise in a biblical sense, you have to start in the right place, and that is with the fear of the Lord. That is recognizing who really he is, who God is. And if God is honored, and if God is not honored and his word is not followed, well, according to the Hebrew tradition, and I would say even according to what Jesus would say, you can't know wisdom. You cannot know wisdom. So the purpose of Proverbs is to give us wisdom, help us understand, yes, but apply it so that we begin to walk in the fear of the Lord, in that wisdom. One said this, he said, if you lack knowledge, go to school. If you lack wisdom, get on your knees. Knowledge is not wisdom. Wisdom is the proper use of knowledge. It's the application, I would call it. We'll get to that in a moment. So you can know stuff about stuff without doing anything about it. Isn't that right? I mean, I know people, I have friends, I won't name anybody, and there's nobody here, of course, like this, but we know stuff about stuff, and lots of stuff, but we don't know what to do with it. Isn't that true? I mean, we don't know. That's not wisdom. That's knowledge, but we need to apply what that says. James 3 has a really interesting take on that. Verses 13 through 18. If you are wise and understand God's way, prove it by living an honorable life. You hear what he said? He said, if you think you are so smart and you know what things are, then show me. That's really what he's saying. Prove it. Show me that that's what you really understand. So let me go on. Living an honorable life, doing good works with the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you are bitterly jealous and there is selfish ambition in your heart, don't cover up the truth with boasting and lying. For jealousy and selfishness, that's the selfish ambition, are not God's kind of wisdom. Such things are earthly, unspiritual, demonic. You catch that? I mean, James is just in your face. Those things are earthly, unspiritual, demonic. For wherever there is jealousy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and evil of every kind. And then in verse 17, so he contrasts that with what godly wisdom is. But the wisdom from above is first of all pure. Pure. So you can discern. Is that wisdom pure or not pure? It is also peace-loving, gentle at all times, willing to yield to others. It's full of mercy and the fruit of good deeds. It shows no favoritism and is always sincere. And those who are peacemakers will plant seeds of peace and reap a harvest of righteousness. So James is contrasting the two. The wisdom that we see around us, the wisdom that the world purports to be true, versus the wisdom that God gives us that is based on foundational stuff like Jesus. So now let me just explain really quick what that means. The jealousy, sometimes it's translated bitter envy. It carries this idea of harshness and destruction in the Greek. I mean, whenever you translate something, believe me, because of Russian, and I've had to do this, oftentimes there are words you can't translate well. Well, this is one of those in Greek. It means harshness. It means destruction. Now, we don't think of it that way, jealousy, right? We hear, oh, well, he's jealous. No big deal. I mean, but it's harshness and destruction is the way that it's listed. And the other word, though, is selfishness or self-seeking, is specifically about creating strife, creating discord, creating division. So taken together, basically, what James here is saying is, these people that have that, you better watch out for because they're in there to destroy. That's what Satan does. And so therefore, he calls it earthly, ungodly, demonic. Wow. The other little nuance there is that being afraid of them, or at least being careful of them, is the idea of aggressiveness. They're aggressive. They're so right, they're so wise that we know what's right, and we'll let you know. We'll figure it out. If you don't do what I tell you, you just watch out for the results. I mean, that's the idea that goes along with those words. So you can see that it's pretty bad. So let me give you some examples of worldly wisdom, okay? Woody Allen, of course. You know what you're going to expect here. I'm not afraid to die. I just don't want to be there when it happens. Life is what happens, John Lennon said, when you're busy making other plans. Bob Dylan said, a man is a success if he gets up in the morning, goes to bed at night, and in between does what he wants. Carl Sandburg said, I'm an idealist. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm on the way. Abraham Lincoln said this, and in the end, it's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years. Now, there's truth in that one, right? But it's still worldly in that sense. William Perky said, you've got to dance like there's nobody watching. Or Elbert Hubbard said this, do not take life too seriously, you're not going to get out of it alive. And then Maya Angelou said this, my mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive and to do so with passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. So there is some truth in those, isn't there? I wouldn't go so far as to say they're demonic, but anything that is not pure, that does not list those things that James talks about, then we need to question. We need to question. In our world today, I'll say it this way, our world loves gray areas, don't they? Well, you can't judge me. I mean, to you that's sin, but to me that's okay. We like gray areas. And there's so many of them. So and it's hard to pick on just one. So let me give you a couple examples. Sorry, I've got allergies, and so a little bit of weeping. So forgive me. It's not that I'm crying over all you guys or anything. So a gray area might include things like clothing. They change from generation to generation, don't they? I mean, I see these young ladies, and they got these pants that they spent $100 for, and they got all these rips in them, and I offer, and I say, hey, man, I'll go buy you a new pair of pants if you really need some. And they get all offended, of course. Okay, is there anything wrong with those? No, I don't care. I don't really care. But sometimes there's things about clothing, isn't there, that I think that the Lord wants us even to look at and to figure out. Guys and girls, it doesn't matter. There's those kinds of things. Another gray area might be music. I was interacting with a person who just came to Christ not too long ago, and they had found Air One. Do you know what Air One is? Air One's a Christian radio station. K-Light is the other one, and it's, I don't remember, 101.7, something like that, one of those stations anyway. And they said, oh, we didn't know that there was good, edifying, uplifting music. Okay? There is wisdom that's being taught in all of those different songs. So if you listen to a secular station, and I listen to country music sometimes, not all the time, but once in a while, just because I like the stories that are told. But even so, some of those stories are bad stories, aren't they? I got drunk and fell down in the gutter. I mean, that's those kinds of dumb things that they talk about. Or you get into the rap music, and I won't even tell you what they talk about in there. But there's a huge difference between those things. So, another gray area, but can I say that you shouldn't listen to them? There was a pastor friend of mine in Russia that used to do that. Do not watch TV, period. It's sinful. That's Satan's box. And he used to harp on that all the time. Okay, well, I'm not saying that there's not those programs on there. There are. But there's also other things that you can watch if that's... So, to make a blanket judgment, those are one of those gray areas. Another one might be movies. I love adventure movies. I get sick of the cussing. I get sick of that. Why can't they just do it without all this other junk that they put in there? Make it family friendly, so to speak. Is it because nobody will go watch the movies? No, people go watch movies. Might actually be a good thing if we didn't have all that cussing and all that stuff. Now, with those gray areas, we're reluctant to call those evil or demonic. But James isn't. He calls them demonic. Anything, he says, that pulls us away from God, any kind of wisdom that we're listening to, watching, dressing, whatever it might be that does not uplift God, he calls into question. Is he right? I think he is. In the ultimate, yes. Now, is that hard for us? Yes. Because we're so used to the gray areas. We think we can play in those areas, and it's no big deal. I mean, I can put my toes in there, and it's no big deal. Nothing's going to happen, right? Well, he says no. He's saying that bitterness and that self-seeking will apply. That destruction will end up being in our lives. So, when we're faced with those types of things, how do we know? Well, in Philippians chapter 2, verse 5, it says this, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus." You catch that? His mind should be in us. We're not talking about anything other than being like Christ. So, you say, well, God didn't write anything about what kind of pants I should wear, whether they got these holes or not, or whatever it is, okay? I don't know what those gray areas are for you. I shouldn't eat this, shouldn't drink that, shouldn't do this, shouldn't speed. I mean, there's all those things, those gray areas. I'm not suggesting, but the filter has to be, what would Jesus do? What is his heart? How would he approach this? And folks, it's an easy one to do. I'm not saying it's easy always to obey, because it's not. But that's what he's calling us to look beyond those gray areas and really filter and say, Jesus, what would you want us to do? What would you like me to do? So let me just give this an application for yourselves, okay? So if you have spiritual confusion in your house, maybe it's because you're not all on the same spiritual page. Maybe you're not. What are you feeding into your lives? I don't know what it is. Is it because one of the things on whatever day it is, you open the paper, what's my horoscope for the week or for the day? Okay, well, I can tell you for a fact that horoscopes are not from God. As a matter of fact, that is one place that the Bible speaks specifically about and says, do not do it. Because it is a doorway to Satan. Do not do that. I mean, it's plain. Now, if you do it to your own detriment. Because what God is saying is, do not do it. That is the one area, or at least one area, that is there. But if there's confusion, where does confusion come from? Satan. So we need to ask why. What's going on? And get that right. Another one could be just confusion at work. I've been in those situations where it's just an impressive work situation where there is not any kind of basis for love, for grace, for hope, for nothing. Where people are doing evil things. And that's hard. I'm not saying I know how to fix that, except for us to be good witnesses in those places. We do what Jesus asks us to. We respond as Christ would respond, and we love as Christ would love. And we forgive as Christ would forgive. And thirdly, though, what about church? Is there ever confusion in church? I mean, thankfully, I've never been in this church where they split over the types of chairs or the color of the carpet or the windows or whatever it was. I hope I never, God forbid that we ever get there. But when there's dissonance, that is the division in the church, what is causing that? What is causing that? Myron Augsburger, who was a well-known author, said it this way. And just to point out the differences between God's wisdom and the world's. And he says this, God says, blessed are the poor in spirit. But we say, blessed are the achievers. Isn't that true? God says, blessed are those who mourn. And we say, blessed are the self-fulfilled. No, sounds okay. Jesus said, blessed are the merciful. But we say, blessed are the manipulators. So Jesus actually challenges the very selfishness of that wisdom, so-called wisdom, that determines so much of our own social behavior. He challenges it. He goes exactly opposite. So if you're hearing the world say, take what you find $50 out on the street and you know somebody just walked away from the ATM, the world says, pick it up and put it in your pocket, right? And Jesus, the offering plate. God says, I would say, pick it up, go after that person and give it back. That is a totally different response than what our worldly wisdom should be about. The world says, take advantage wherever there's opportunity. Jesus says, just because you should or you can doesn't mean you should. He doesn't say it exactly like that, but he says that idea. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And so, folks, that's a totally different way of looking at our world. Totally different. And so much of what we see and experience in our own lives daily on the news, in books, newspapers, interactions with other people comes from the world. So let me just point out just a couple things and we'll wrap up here real quick. First of all, knowledge does not equal wisdom. It does not. You can know something, but if you don't apply what you know, that's all it is. You know stuff about stuff that says stuff, but you don't know anything. It's the truth. Secondly, wisdom does not equal godliness. It does not. Just because you have some wisdom does not mean you're godly. People in our world have wisdom. They know how to take the knowledge and apply it, but it's not godly wisdom, and it doesn't equal godliness. Now, righteousness, maybe. That is, we're right living, we're doing what we should, But there is a wisdom from above and there is a wisdom from below. So where is your wisdom coming from? Oprah or Obadiah? Dr. Phil or the Philippians? Montel or Matthew? I know people who live for those types of, I'm not saying those guys, I know some of the shows are already gone, but I know people who live for those types of, my mom lived for the, I call them lust in the afternoon. Soap operas. That's what I called them, lust in the afternoon. That's all it was. She lived, well, what's going to happen to this lady? Who cares? It's an actor. And besides, if you'd be gone 10 years and come back, and I did this, and I knew exactly what the storyline was, because nothing had changed. Nothing changes. Peyton Place, well, there's a reason it's called Peyton Place, because it doesn't change, nothing. You know, to be honest, I am concerned about our world and where we get our wisdom, so-called wisdom. From what is our source of that wisdom? Excuse me. What are we allowing into through our eyes, our ears, our mouth? What are we taking in worldly wise into our lives? Because it will show up, and that's the third piece of wisdom, it will reflect in the fruit of your life. That's a hard one. I don't have to know if you're a Christian or not. I can look at the fruit of your life, and I can tell you pretty much who you are. Now, you can do that, can't you? If you run into people on a daily basis and you get to know them and you see the fruit of their lives, you can tell what provides the basis for their wisdom. What produces the